I'm sure everyone else will just be here in a minute. I'll call them. I'm gonna call them. I'm gonna call.
Hello?
Paul, where are you?
What?
Why aren't you at my RA party?
You're what?
I sent you an invite on LinkedIn and hello.
Did you?
Yes, maybe. I'm always going on about my RA party.
Oh, are you?
Yes. Come to Quinn's RA party. We'll put the Ra in pleasure. Just pleasure with Ra at the end.
No, why didn't you just call it something like extravaganza?
Couldn't fit it on the posters.
Posters.
The posters I was going to make. Listen, there's only one other person here and it's weird. They didn't even know it was fancy dress. They look ridiculous.
Quinn's, I'm washing my chair. And I'm in Canada.
Well, that's awfully convenient. So, do you know anything about Ra? No? Okay, that's good. We'll learn it together. This game is a classic, and not just because it says so on the back of the box. This game was first published in 1999, and while that doesn't sound like much, that's enough to make it out of Board Game Geek's 85,000 games. This was the 12th entry in the database, and what we've got here is a fancy new edition that has some board game tech I've never seen before. The board is actually indented, and I can see why Wind Rider Games did this. I'm not sure there's a man or woman watching this who, when they go to a board game night, don't spend the entire time rubbing the board with their hands and then with their face. Once your friends are done with their rubbing, you can tell them that this is an auction game, and a nice and simple one at that. You all play Egyptian advisors across 3 epochs or rounds of Egyptian history, and your turn is very simply spent either reaching in to this lovely bag of 180 tiles, producing a tile, not that one, and popping it onto the auction track, which gradually fills up with a lot that you're all bidding for. The other thing you can do on your turn, instead of drawing a tile, is invoke Ra, 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 who's the ancient Egyptian god of M&Ms. Ra is also invoked accidentally if someone happens to draw a red Ra tile from the bag. The odds of that are always about 1 in 6, and you're going to pop that Ra tile up here on the Ra track, which is a timer for the end of the epoch. When it fills up, epoch's over, it's time to score what you've got and move on to the next epoch. Now, so you can trigger an auction, or they happen accidentally, and auctions are the beautiful pyramid in which the magical, ancient game of Ra can be found. But I'm going to ask you to be patient. We're going to talk about auctions in just a second. First, I'm going to explain these tiles that you're bidding for. Pharaoh tiles give 5 points at the end of each epoch to the player who has the most. The players who have the least pharaohs lose 2 points. You've got 1 king? What a jump. I've got 4. Gold tiles give you 3 points. Do you want 3 points? You can just have 3 points. The waters of the Nile are cool, and the Nile's tiles are cooler. At the end of an epoch, you get 1 point for each riverside farm tile you've got, but only if at least one of these is a flood tile. Otherwise, you get your just deserts. It's just deserts. Here are the 5 kinds of civilization tiles in the bag, or as I call them, crime tiles. You've got stealing, graffiti, vandalism, making drugs, and tripping balls. And any player with no crime at the end of an epoch is considered uncool and loses 5 points. If, however, you manage to get 3, 4, or 5 different types of cool crimes, you gain 5, 10, or 15 points. Monument tiles are unique in that they only score at the end of the game, which is to say, after the 3rd epoch. Again, you want to try and complete a full set, this time of 8 different monuments, but also, you're going to get points for having lots of the same monument. Finally, we have the 8 god tiles: Anubis, Bastet, Khnum, Horus, Seth, Sobek, Thoth, and Uto, who, in addition to sounding like the worst boy band ever, can be spent before the epoch ends stealing a single tile from the main board. Ooh, I'm also going to point out that Uto's tiny snake head has a tiny crown! Here's the final thing you gotta know to do a cool Egypt. Only the tiles with dung beetles stick around between epochs, so your crimes, floods, gold, and gods will all bugger off each time you score them. Does that sound like a lot to remember? Well, trust me, it's not. And not just because all players have a handy little reference card. You see, this auction track, these numbers are only ever mental chewing gum. And actually, Ra is demonstrative of the perfect amount of calculation that a game can have, where when it's not your turn, you can lose yourself in adding up the auction track with the tiles in front of you and cross-referencing that with what your friends have. But when it is your turn, that mental chewing gum that you're blowing out into a big bubble, it's a plan, the bubble can pop and you just make a snap decision. It's quick when you want it to be and slow when you want it to be. And a lot of that's down to the fact that on your turn, you only ever decide whether to add a new tile to the auction or call an auction. Oh my God, let's talk about auctions. So there are all kinds of auctions in board games, from dangerous ones where you edge the price up a bit at a time, like in Power Grid, to silly ones like Panic on Wall Street with everyone shouting all the time, to emotionally abhorrent ones like in the delicious game of Chinatown. Now, there is a case to be made that Ra is in fact the best auction board game ever made. And that is an interesting case to make because it's also the simplest. So when an auction gets triggered, either by accident or deliberately, the person who triggered it grabs the statue, and then going clockwise from them, everyone gets one shot to bid with their set of 4 auction tiles. Now, you can either pass, saying, I do not want this entire lot of stuff, or you put a number forward. And if you put your number forward, like, you only get one chance at this. You bid once, and then when it gets back to the person with the statue, they have the final bid. And the highest number takes everything, which has the tactile joy of claiming all the poker chips in the middle of the table. But also, there is a 1 at the start of a game of Ra, and you're going to swap that tile you bid with the 1. You see, every auction in Ra is also an auction for the last auction tile used. And you're going to take the auction tile you won and turn it over. So you only have 3 auction tiles to bid with, so essentially you can win 4 auctions each epoch in a game of Ra. If no one bids, all the tiles on the auction are lost and play continues, but, and this rule should be delivered like Brad Pitt in Fight Club, saying that if this is your first night, you have to fight. If you invoked Ra and all your friends pass, you have to bid. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds super mediocre. Why is this so good? Well, let me walk like an Egyptian you through why it's so good. Because the game's set in Egypt. Or should that be SETI in Egypt? This is the point in the video when I remind you of a rule that you've probably forgotten. Remember that as you draw those Ra tiles accidentally triggering auctions, you're going to be getting closer to the end of the epoch. The moment that last space is filled, everyone flips their tiles back over, you all score, and you move on to the next epoch. Meaning, any numbers you didn't spend, auctions you didn't win, are wasted. And that is a catastrophe. That is going to be as if a couple of ancient Egyptian embalmers went over your theoretical score, pulling all the numbers out. Meaning, what we have here with deciding when to bid and when to buy things is nothing more or less than a game of chicken. So this isn't just a game of winning auctions then. No, it's a game of winning better auctions than your friends against the clock when the clock is f***ed. It's why the decision of whether to trigger an auction on your turn is so interesting. Because what you're saying is, like, let's say we've got a lot that's just 3 slightly rubbish tiles. You can try and improve your game state by going, yeah, I'll call an auction, and relying on your friends being scared and hungry and not knowing if they'll get a better chance. You're essentially feeding bait to river crocodiles, but that's a dangerous game, because if they're feeling braver than you, then they all pass, you're left, well, then you have to bid, and you have to waste one of your tokens. What numbers do you have? Do you have high numbers or low numbers? And if they have high numbers and you have low ones, it's great for you to trigger mediocre lots, because they don't want to waste high numbers on that, but then they don't want you to get away with it with a low number. What's the number in the middle? It's a massively complicated little engine that just comes to life when you start playing it. It's kind of like blackjack, where you're all the dealer and you're all playing and you're all broke. But this game of chicken has some equally delicious rewards. You see, once you've spent all 4 of your auction tiles, you're not even in the round anymore. Which means if only one person is left towards the end of the epoch, just waiting for the 1 or 2 Ra tiles left, if they are canny enough to pull that off, nothing stops them from just taking turn after turn, filling up the entire auction track, hoping they don't draw a Ra tile, at which point the game is actually blackjack. And then if they draw a Ra tile, oh, well, I guess they'll just have to take everything, all of it, for the lowest possible price. and then go again. And I love games with this shooting the moon mechanic, you know, a play that's so difficult. And the thing is, I've never even seen anyone do that in a game of Ra, but that everyone can be angling for. And then if you pull it off, even as you win and go blasting off into the distance on a ridiculous score, your friends will love you for it because you pulled it off. So that's why the decision of whether to call auctions is super interesting. The only other choice you ever make in a game of Ra is what number do you bid? Do you bid your 13, your 8, your 5, your 2? Because you're not assigning a concrete value to that lot. Don't forget, you're predicting. You're predicting whether your friends are going to get greedy and scared, and you're predicting whether better lots are going to come along. Throwing away your 13, that's huge because you've given away the biggest number on the table, and then you've given away a lot of power because you no longer give your friends the knowledge that you can win any lot that comes along. We talk endlessly on this site about how good board games are made up of interesting decisions. But that's not just interesting for you. Good board games have decisions that are interesting for everybody. And in Ra, you know, it's not just that you're making difficult choices, it's that the choices you make are so discreet and so few that when you make them, they impact everybody. Calling an auction affects everybody. All your friends are going to go, don't call an auction now. If you bid, that's huge. If you don't bid, that's amazing. Your friends are going to love or loathe everything you do. When was the last time your friends were on tenterhooks for every single action you took? Because that's probably why you need Ra in your life. So, does Shut Up and Sit Down recommend Ra? Well, this isn't a tricky decision. Yes, we absolutely do. This game is simple to learn. It's very hard to master. It's competitive without ever telling you you're losing. The new edition is gorgeous, and maybe what I like most of all is that this is a big, tactile game that has the tonality of a small box card game. What the hell are you talking about, Quinns? Did you stay up all night watching Voltron on Netflix? Well, no. I mean, yes, I did, but hear me out. Card games, because they have less components, they tend to play quicker and they have a smaller possibility space, meaning you have more sort of room. You're not in your head, you're not totally focused on the game, and you're not hurriedly taking your turn because you're going to be sat there for 2 hours till your bum's numb. No, Ra plays in just 45 minutes, and because it's played so much on gut feel, you know, your spirits are lifted and your time is your own, and trust me on this, you end up talking. The game's, you know, open as well, and that helps a great deal. You're never really keeping anything secret. Maybe you won't draw attention to the fact that if you get a third pyramid, that'd be really good. But, you know, if your friends have noticed that, then you can talk about your pyramids, and you will talk about your pyramids. And I think I've done quite enough talking, actually. God, in introducing you to Ra, I don't even know if I want to play it. You know, just 2 players. Maybe let's just call it a day, eh? Yeah, thanks awfully for coming round. You know, shame anyone else didn't turn up, but win some, you lose some, I guess. Bye. Take care. Nice to meet you. Whoa! How did you get back in? You know what? You can stay. You can stay right here in the